Good morning. I'm going to read a little bit about religion, although I'm not a religious person myself, but I like to know about these things. The book called the Bhagavad Gita, which contains the life of Krishna, is allowed to be one of the most distinguished of the Puranas for its sublimity and beauty. It lays claim to nearly the highest antiquity that any Indian composition can boast, as the Reverend Mr. Maurice, a very competent judge, allows that there is ample evidence to prove that it actually existed nearly 4,000 years ago. Sir William Jones says that the name of Krishna and the general outline of his story were long anterior to the birth of our Savior, and probably to the time of Homer, we know very certainly. In fact, the sculptures on the walls of the most ancient temples by no one ever doubted to be long anterior to the Christian era, as well as written works equally old, prove beyond the possibility of doubt the superior antiquity of the history of Krishna to that of Jesus. In the first place, the Krishna of India is always represented as a savior or preserver of mankind, precisely the same as Jesus Christ. While he is thus described as a savior, he is also represented to be really the supreme being, taking upon himself the state of man, that is, to be incarnate in the flesh, to save the human race, precisely as Jesus is said to have done by the professors of the Orthodox Christian faith. As soon as Krishna was born, he was saluted with a chorus of Deutas or Devatas or angels, with divine hymns, just as it is related of Jesus in the Orthodox Gospels of Luke. He was cradled among shepherds, to whom were first made known the stupendous feats which stamped his character with marks of divinity. The circumstances here detailed, though not literally the same as those related of Jesus, are so nearly the same that it is evident the one account has been taken from the other. Soon after Krishna's birth, he was carried away by the night and concealed in a region remote from his natal place, for fear of a tyrant whose destroyer it was foretold he would become, and who had, for that reason, ordered all the male children born at that period to be slain. This story is the subject of an immense sculpture in the cave at Elephanta, where the tyrant is represented destroying the children. The date of this sculpture is lost in the most remote antiquity. It must, at the very latest period, be fixed at least many hundred years previous to the birth of Jesus Christ, as we shall presently see, but with much greater possibility, thousands instead of hundreds of years might be assigned to its existence. Krishna was, by the male line of royal descent, though he was actually born in a state the most abject and humiliating, in a dungeon, as Jesus was descended from King David and was born in a cave used as a stable. The moment Krishna was born, the whole room was splendidly illuminated, and the countenances of his father and mother emitted rays of glory. Krishna could speak as soon as he was born and comforted his mother. Yeah, it's comforted. I was going to say confronted. It's comforted his mother. And as did the infant Jesus, according to the same gospel history. As Jesus was preceded and assisted by his kinsman John, so Krishna was preceded by his elder brother Ram, who was born a little time before him, and assisted him in purifying the world polluted with demons and monsters. Ram was nourished and brought up by the same foster parents as Krishna. Thus, the Gospels of James states that the prophecy of Zechariah and the supernatural pregnancy of his wife being notorious, Herod suspected that John might be the expected Messiah and commanded him to be delivered up in order that he might murder him. But Elizabeth had sent him into the wilderness to his cousin, by which means he escaped. Krishna descended into Hades or hell and returned to Vaikuntha, his proper paradise. One of his epiths was that of a good shepherd, which we know was that of Jesus. After his death, like Jesus Christ, he ascended into heaven. From the glory described above in the Evangelium Infanti, we see the reason why in all pictures of the Nativity, the light is made to arise from the body of the infant, and why the father and mother are often depicted with glorious rounds around their faces, around their heads, I'm sorry. After the birth of Krishna, the Indian prophet Narad, having heard of his fame, visited his father and mother at Gokul, examined the stars, and declared him to be of celestial descent. As Mr. Maurice observes, here is a close imitation of the Magi, guided by his star and visiting the infant at Bethlehem. Krishna was said to have been born at Mathura, pronounced Mathra, on the river Jumna, where many of his miracles was performed, and in which at this day he is held in higher veneration than in any other place in Hinduism. Mr. Maurice says, the Arabic edition of the Evangelium Infanti records Matarea near Hermopolis in Egypt to have been the place where the infant Savior resided during his absence from the land of Judea and until Herod died. At this place, Jesus is reported to have wrought many miracles, and among others, to have produced in that arid region a fountain of fresh water, the only one in Egypt. Mr. Savary says that at a little distance from Heliopolis is a small village of Matarea, so called because it was a fresh water spring, the only one in Egypt. This spring has been rendered famous by tradition, which relates that the Holy Family fleeing from Herod came hither. They came hither, that the Virgin bathed the Holy Child Jesus in this fountain, and that much balsam which is a form of sap from trees, was formerly produced in the neighborhood. Eusebius and Athanasius state that when Joseph and Mary arrived in Egypt, they took up their abode in a city of the Thebae or Thebes, in which was a superb temple of Serapis. On their going into the temple, all the statues fell flat on their faces to the infant Savior. This story is also told by Evangelium Infanti, meaning Chrishna. After Chrishna came to the man's state, one of his first miracles was to cure a leper. Matthew states that the early miracle performed by Jesus to have been exactly similar, the cure of a leper. Upon another occasion, a woman poured on the head of Krishna a box of ointment, for which he cured her of her ailment. Thus, in like manner, a woman came and anointed the head of Jesus. At a certain time, Krishna, taking a walk with the other cowherds with whom he was brought up, they chose him as their king, and everyone had a place under him assigned to him. Nearly the same story is related to Jesus and his playfellows. At another time, the infant Jesus, declaring himself to be the Good Shepherd, turned all his young companions into sheep. But afterward, as the solicitation of their parents restored them to their proper form. This is the counterpart of a story of the creation by Chrishna of new sheep and new cowboys, when Brahma, to try his divinity, had stolen those which belonged to Nandas, his father's farm. To show his humility and meekness, he condescended to wash the feet of Brahmins, as Jesus did of his disciples. You see, Jesus turned them into sheep, and then, to prove he was a good guy, he washed their feet. I'm sorry if I turn into sheep. Krishna had a dreadful combat with the serpent Kalinaga, which had poisoned all the cowherds. In the apocryphal gospel above alluded to, the infant Savior had a remarkable adventure with a serpent, which had poisoned one of his companions. Krishna was sent to a tutor to be instructed, and he instantly astonished him by his profound learning. In the Gospel of the Infancy, it is related that Jesus was sent to Zacchaeus to be taught, and in the like manner he astonished him with his great learning. This also must remind the reader of the disputation in the temple with the Jewish doctors. Krishna desired his mother to look into his mouth, and she saw all the nations in the world painted in it. The Virgin saw the same in the mouth of Jesus. Mr. Maurice observes that the Gospel of the Infancy is alluded to by Irenaeus, which shows that it was among the earliest of the ancient Gospel histories. Finally, Krishna was put to death by being crucified. He descended into hell and afterwards ascended into heaven. The descent into Hades or hell and the ascent into paradise or heaven is stated by Mr. Maurice. The crucifixion is not stated by him, but my authority for the assertion I shall adduce presently. It is impossible for anyone to deny the close connection between the story of Jesus and Krishna. We now come to the most important point: how such connections is to be rendered consistent with the existence of the whole of the Christian system as at present expounded by our priests. How the priests are to explain it away, how those men who are so unfortunate as to feel themselves obliged to yield to such conclusion evidence can be proved to be what the Reverend Mr. Maurice, in true Orthodox train, calls impious infidels. So anyway, I'm gonna stop here. Crucifixion. What is crucifixion? Well, to some, it's a sign of renunciation. It's an allegory, like a sign of renunciation and the victory of the inner Christ that resides in us all. This crucifixion is reference to what Buddhahood is, or what the Platonists also called, liberation, meaning it's a sign that you renounce everything that is physical, right? And the victory of the inner Christ is the victory of the true self, right? This also goes into ancient metaphysics, because in the end, religion is just a dumbed down version of metaphysics, a dumbed down version of natural philosophy. So crucifixion is a sign of renunciation and the victory of our inner Christ that resides in us all. The victory of the true self. They called it Christ. Other people call it the soul. Other people call it the absolute. It has many names. Everybody calls it a different name. But it's the victory of the true self over material, over the false self, the ego. Victory over the demons, victory of all of that. For instance, when Jesus, has this moment in the desert with Satan, he's fighting his inner demons. He is renouncing everything that is the false self, which is Satan, and triumphing, meaning he is renouncing everything that is the false self and focusing on the true self. Yeah. There are two selves in each one of us. Small self, which has a period, which has a beginning in time and an end in time. The false self, it encompasses everything that you are and everything that you do here in this world, but it has a beginning and an end in time. That's the false self. Most people are absorbed with the false self, meaning the malignant state of adoration of the false self is called narcissism. Narcissism is the false self manifesting. Okay, continuing. Crucifixion is also a symbol of persecution by the masses. The masses literally persecute someone who has awakened to reality. Krishna was shot dead by arrows, then he was hanged on a tree for display. The masses renounced his teachings. The masses preferred the pleasures. They preferred the everything that the material world had to offer. All the deadly sins, quote unquote. They renounced these teachings and preferred to live in sin. The story of Jesus is something similar. Jesus sacrificed himself so that everybody could be, quote unquote, saved, because he knew, nobody would prefer, renouncing the material world and, admitting or how should I say, they prefer to live in sin, quote unquote. Yeah. There was something else I was going to say about this. That's why Christians say, "Oh, you can only attain liberation through Christ. Christ is going to save you, quote unquote." Um, Again, they are distorting a little bit this teaching. Only through Christ can you be saved. Only through the Son can you be saved. Again, this Christ, this absolute, this like the Hindus call Brahman, is, or the soul is within in each one of us, and all you have to do is listen to it. The true self, you know. I'm a little bit, taking baby steps in these areas. The stuff that I'm trying to connect is very ancient. You can find it in Platonism, you can find it in ancient Buddhism and the Upanishads. You can find this information in those texts. So these stories, right, are secularized metaphysics. These stories that became religions. You see, they try to use analogies to explain, because it's impossible to explain in words. You kind of have to use poetry, analogy. You can you have to use those things to arrive at certain objective truths. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that take things literally. They don't understand allegory. They don't understand, these or satire or stuff like that. They don't get it. They take things literally, and that's when religion enters the picture. So I think I'm gonna shut up now. Have a nice day.